future of capital markets runs on Bitcoin. Introducing Roxum, the first ever exchange where Bitcoiners can trade treasury stocks entirely in BTC. Get exposure to top Bitcoin holding companies like MicroStrategy and Metaplanet, priced in Bitcoin from the start. No fiat, no middlemen. This is what financial freedom looks like. Early access now live at roxum.com/treasuries. Built by Bitcoiners for Bitcoiners.
So, tell us about your furry friend here. What's his name?
Oh, this? This is Bitcoin.
Bitcoin.
It's not just a cat, he's family.
Quite a name, and I must say, looks quite pampered.
Oh, absolutely. Bitcoin deserves nothing but the best. He's my little prince.
But with such a valuable pet, aren't you afraid of losing him?
Losing Bitcoin? No, it never happened before, so it's not something I worry about. Excuse me for a moment. Bitcoin, stay here, right?
Bitcoin, no! Bitcoin, come on, little buddy, Bitcoin, I need you. Don't go.
In a world far away. Nah, just kidding. This story begins in this world. It all started in 1460 in Antwerp, when the first commodities exchange was created, but the real transformation came in 1602, when the Amsterdam Stock Exchange was founded. Considered the oldest in the world, it was the first to trade financial assets. Over the years, Britain expanded its colonial and maritime influence, and the British pound sterling overtook the Dutch guilder in the market. Thus, the London Stock Exchange became the financial centre of the world. The 20th century came, and the world got into some trouble. But shortly after World War II, the Bretton Woods Agreement established the dollar as the world's primary reserve currency, and the centre of the planet moved to Wall Street. Today, we're travelling at the speed of light towards a new age, an era shaped by the consolidation of Bitcoin as the currency that will define the future of the markets. We present Roxum, a new Bitcoin-denominated market that allows trading all sorts of securities, commodities, derivatives, options, and anything you can imagine. Roxum, rock-solid markets.
Security matters. Zappo Bank, the only way to bank your Bitcoin. Apply now at zappobank.com.
Welcome back to the Breaking Bit. I'm excited to be back with you. I was not able to do the show last week. I was on the road across the pond in Europe, but I am back now, and we're going to get back into the mostly regular cadence of shows. So excited to be here with you today. We've got a fun show with you. We've got a great guest who has been on this show before, actually talking about his book on parenting, but he has more than parenting advice to give. This is George Mekhail. I'm going to add him to the stage right now. George is the managing director of Bitcoin for Corporations. George, it is great to have you back on here. How you doing?
And yeah, excited to talk Bitcoin treasury companies today.
Yes, I think it's the perfect time to do this. You also pointed out, my scheduling was perhaps we're going to have some competing competing streams here, because Saylor is going to be Bitcoin podcasting his treasury company, MicroStrategy's earnings call here in just a few minutes. They just released the results a little while ago. We can maybe dig into that in a little bit, but do want to talk about this space more broadly, because I think right now, a lot of people, Bitcoin's been sort of crabbing sideways. Let's say we're actually maybe a couple $1,000s under where we started when President Trump was inaugurated. So, we're January to October, almost November now. And basically price has been essentially flat throughout that period. During that time, a lot of Bitcoin treasury companies, this obviously became, there was a lot of excitement around this, a lot of hype, a lot of run up, and a lot of big run downs. We still see these companies popping up, but I wanted to talk to you because you sit in an interesting vantage point with what you do at Bitcoin for Corporations. You're not, representing some individual company as much as you are looking at this space more broadly. What does this actually mean? I think there's no denying that these companies are here to stay. We're going to see more of them. But I think a lot of people right now are kind of wondering, like, what the heck is going on? So maybe, what's your kind of vibe on, what's your vibe check on the state of the market right now? What are you seeing from your seat? How are you interpreting everything that's happening?
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously an interesting time. Like you said, I think there's a lot happening, and it's hard to kind of just like break down what is just Twitter sentiment, what is real life. And I think we're just in a phase of price discovery. Ultimately, like people are really trying to figure out what these companies are worth. What does it mean to hold Bitcoin in your treasury? What does it mean to accumulate Bitcoin in a way that is accretive to shareholders? So it's not just that the companies are being repriced, and if you are sort of a Bitcoiner, you want to see this happen. You want to see everything be repriced in Bitcoin terms, and in my view, that's essentially what's taking place. And I think that period of price discovery is going to be challenging. There's going to be a lot of swings, and ultimately, it's no surprise that these treasury companies are going to be pretty correlated with the price of Bitcoin. So Bitcoin is stagnant. They're going to be stagnant or worse once Bitcoin continues to pump. I think you're going to see treasury stocks, follow suit. Obviously, not financial advice. We don't know this for sure, but it stands to reason that if you are a investor of any sort, but especially an institutional investor who needs access to, a fixed income security created by Treasury that yields 10%, right? Like, there's just going to continue to be demand for these products as not just price discovery, but like just discovery of what this asset actually is and what it means. I mean, just think about in your sort of normal day-to-day life when you're talking to people about Bitcoin, and they have no idea what you're talking about for the most part. Like, we're still kind of weirdos. We're still kind of like, and we're becoming more mainstream. I think people are starting to recognize that Bitcoin's not going anywhere. But now take that level of complexity and add in sort of corporate finance to the mix, and it gets even more difficult to explain. So I think it's a lot of that's happening right now. There's always obviously like this huge hype cycle where a lot of companies kind of popped up and used even just the announcement of, hey, we're adding Bitcoin to our balance sheet as like a marketing tactic, and then they just kind of disappeared. So there's going to be some of that, but I can tell you again, from my vantage point, I do talk to a lot of these CEOs. We are in conversations with several of these companies that have come online, and the ones that are going to make it are the ones that have teams that understand what Bitcoin is, right? That are have the mindset of this is a digital gold rush, and the name of the game is to acquire as much Bitcoin as possible. Yes, we want to. Obviously, we have a fiduciary responsibility to give shareholders value by doing this. But the conviction is the more Bitcoin we acquire, the more value that is going to be go back to shareholders. So the ones that have that conviction, the ones who understand Bitcoin and have that mentality are the ones that are doing well in terms of like how much Bitcoin they're stacking, and ultimately, I think their stock prices will reflect that in due time.
Yeah, it's been interesting, seeing these companies. MNAV has basically become, I guess, like some sort of a guiding star for a lot of people. Whether or not that's the right approach perhaps remains to be seen. But as these companies have kind of, have taken a bit of a downturn as Bitcoin's been sort of crabbing along, we've seen those MNAVs compress. And we see a lot of, I mean, maybe not a lot, but so far at least a couple that I've seen saying, okay, we're looking at some potential stock buybacks. Is this something that you view as like good, natural, healthy, was always going to happen if you saw MNAV compressed because it logically makes sense? Is this a sign of something else? Or how are you tracking that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's look. I think MetaPlanet in particular, the company
Yeah.
that announced this recently, has one of the best teams in the space. They understand capital markets probably better than most teams. I mean, obviously, strategy understands what's going on, and then their execution has been near flawless. And so I look at what MetaPlanet is doing, and yeah, I think it probably was always inevitable. And I think if anything, it's a signal to the market that they think that their stock price is probably undervalued, and so it is a strategic move by them. I don't think that there should be any like cause for concern. I know there's a lot of different back and forth like narratives that paint this in a negative light, but I see it as positive. I see it as bullish. They're taking shares off the market. They see their stock price is undervalued, and I think it's ultimately just going to be valuable to their shareholders. So Metaplanet, I think, is one of the most important and best run companies in the space. And not only that, one of the things that's I think undervalued both about what Metaplanet is doing, what Strategy is doing, in sort of their efforts. Some of them have stated this explicitly. Some just kind of more kind of read between the lines. They're becoming banks, right? They're becoming a better version of banks ultimately. And every analogy falls short, right? It's like when we talk about Bitcoin being gold, it's like, well, it's better than gold, but it's like, let's just kind of use that as a placeholder. I think of that in the same way. It's like they're becoming banks, but like not in the same way that we think about banks. They're just becoming they're replacing that the role of banks in society to actually provide the value that banks have historically provided. So what I mean is, if you look at Stretch, for example, it's essentially like a money market account that yields 10, and I think they just raised it to 10.5%. You can put your money in that. You can do it on Robinhood now. You can put your money in that account. It's fully liquid, and you're earning 10.5. What is the average savings account yielding right now? Like 2%, 3% maybe. And so
if you're lucky.
Right. And so by creating these instruments that are ultimately backed by Bitcoin and the conviction in Bitcoin, they're doing the job that banks, they're serving a role that banks should have been serving, right? Like they're providing this valuable instrument, this vehicle for even a retail investor who has Robinhood on their phone, and earning a return that you can't get at a normal bank. And so by doing that, they're actually making the not to be too hyperbolic here, but they're making the world better, right? Fix the money, fix the world. This is one of the steps that we're seeing in that process. And I think, again, it's undervalued. I think it's very good for Japan, what Metaplanet is doing. And I think as more people learn about products like Stretch, it's going to be realized that it's better for the U.S. economy and U.S. investors as well.
And necessary caveat on my part for all of this is, and I think it's just important for people who stumble across this who may be very new to Bitcoin, is the best thing for the average person doing is just to buy Bitcoin spot, get a large enough UTXO, transfer it to cold storage, continue trying to create value and stack more sats, and you will be just fine. This
Yep.
What we're talking about here is stuff that is definitely not for everyone, but it is clearly for some people. There's clearly demand for this. There's clearly been, when we talk about Strategy specifically, clearly a lot of demand for these different instruments, many of which are, basically, I guess, all of which are very novel besides their, just MSTR, their baseline security there. Do you think we start to see even more, like, is this it for Strategy in terms of like, they've got their kind of, they've got their little core group of products now. They've been received very well. They're growing. They're available in more places. It is kind of wild to see that on Robinhood. Like, this is accessible to a lot of people. Do you think they continue to expand that portfolio of different products? Is there enough of demand for that? Or is there a certain point where they say, you know what, we've got enough here. We want to kind of keep the focus there. I'm just not really sure where does that continue to expand to? Like, is there a limiting factor there for how many of these types of different products they would want to offer, or another company would want to offer? Maybe it's not Strategy, but obviously they're the ones doing it right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see if they say anything about it on the earnings call here in a little bit.
Yeah.
I imagine they're probably going to continue to innovate and create more instruments that appeal to different segments of the market. I think it's important to keep in mind that the Bitcoin treasury kind of movement has barely scratched the surface in terms of just like overall how much money there is in the system. And so, yeah, I think they'll probably continue to create more. But I think that's like, I think one thing to keep in mind too with all of this is not everyone is going to be like Strategy or be like Metaplanet in terms of what it even means to be a Bitcoin treasury company. If you look at even just like the S&P 500 or any of the indexes, it's not a collection of companies that are all the same, that are all doing the same thing, right? And so it's almost like really obvious to say, but I think it kind of gets lost in the hype and the just kind of all the narratives that like all these Bitcoin treasury companies are created equal and that they're all just Bitcoin treasury companies. I think kind of the next phase of this, both price discovery and asset discovery, kind of part of the cycle that we're in, is going to be people starting to differentiate these companies into what they actually do, right? What is the underlying operating business? I mean, yeah, some of them are pure play Bitcoin treasury companies, and their whole mandate is to raise capital, buy Bitcoin, rinse and repeat. But not all of them are going to be able to do that. Not all of them are going to be able to essentially be the new type of Bitcoin bank. In the same way that, again, there's like the big four, big five right now. Maybe we'll see a different reality in the future where it's Metaplanet and its strategy and a couple others that get a large enough sort of treasury reserve of Bitcoin where they can create the type of demand that strategy has for their instruments. It's obviously going to be tough to have the same level of kind of backing, but my point is we're going to start differentiating these companies into more like, okay, this company like Fold, for instance, Bitcoin rewards company, great business. They make money, they make revenue, they reinvest some of it in the company, they pay their bills, and they buy Bitcoin. And so they're not only focused on raising capital to buy Bitcoin, they're focused on making their business better so that they can keep accumulating Bitcoin. And so I think that's going to be what's more normalized moving forward. You're going to start seeing more of the Folds. You're going to start seeing even some of like the Figmas. Figma's another underrated one that we don't talk about a lot in the Bitcoin space. Came out of nowhere, IPO'd and then revealed that they had a bunch of Bitcoin on their balance sheet, like just casually, creating the best designer software on the market and also stacking Bitcoin. So I think that's really what's happening is companies and CFOs and boards are starting to realize if we have all this excess cash, we cannot keep it in a cash position. And even like some of these indexes are not getting us the yield where we're keeping up with inflation. So what is a better treasury asset? And a lot of them are coming to the same conclusion that, Bitcoin is the best asset that you could hold on your balance sheet. So I think it's going to be more kind of integrated into the overall market more naturally than kind of what we've seen in these hype cycles where it's just kind of like people trying to get in on the momentum.
I think that's absolutely true, and the Figma one is very interesting. I wanna kind of maybe circle back to that, but first I do want to ask, because you brought up the idea of these different types of Bitcoin treasury companies, and I think this is one of the things that's most fascinating to me right now. You mentioned Fold. There's a lot of other ones that are out there that are just Bitcoin. They're Bitcoin companies, and they've had Bitcoin on their balance sheet for maybe many years, and now they're going public. And why did they have Bitcoin on their balance sheet? Well, because they're run by Bitcoiners who know Bitcoin is the best thing they could hold on their balance sheet. Yeah, they keep some cash for operating, but they run a Bitcoin business. They make revenue maybe in dollars or in Bitcoin, and then they reinvest a portion of that to hold on their balance sheet and serve as this treasury that continues to grow and grow and grow and become more significant. You've got that type of company contrasted with, I would say, the pure play, as you would call, like, look, we're just a vehicle for acquiring as much Bitcoin as possible. Then you've got this other one that's maybe a little bit of a hybrid. I think BHODL in the UK is similar to this, where it's like we are a Bitcoin treasury company, but as part of that, we're going to be basically leasing some very fat lightning channels. We're going to be trying to generate yield on the Bitcoin we have by putting it to work in a layer 2 Bitcoin network, the Lightning Network. And then you've got, maybe we separate strategy as something that's a little bit different, but still fits that alternate mold, which is we have an operating business, but the operating business is not, purely a Bitcoin operating business, like a Semler was, or some of these others. So you've got these different categories. Is there one that you think ends up kind of emerging victorious from a categorical perspective, one that makes the most sense? Like, to me, it seems to be the treasury companies that are also operating Bitcoin businesses. If they can scale their treasuries at the same level through these same public instruments that the pure plays can, it seems to me those would be the better options long term. But I don't know. Am I missing something there? How are you looking at this? Do we start to see more sorts of, more trial and error with these different sorts of strategies here?
Yeah. No, I definitely think we'll see trial and error. I think there's probably categories that haven't even emerged yet that we're not even talking about. But to, I guess, answer your question, one thing I think to keep in mind is that, strategy has a significant underlying business that we don't talk about a lot. Like they run
Yeah.
a massive business intelligence software company that has been profitable, I think, almost every year. And their big problem was realizing that they had a huge cash hoard and that it was a melting ice cube. That's sort of the origin story of Saylor, convincing his board and his executives to add Bitcoin to their balance sheet. So they fall within that category of this, I guess, hybrid company that is acquiring Bitcoin as fast as possible, but also has a significant operating business. They've just gotten so far ahead now where their Bitcoin strategy is the most significant part of their business by a long shot, and it just overshadows the software company. But still an important kind of note to keep in mind. So yeah, I mean, I don't know if one category is sort of more important than the other. I think we need them all. I think that the Figmas of the world are the ones that excite me the most personally because they represent Bitcoiners taking new ground in a lot of ways, where we're just like Bitcoin. I love Fold. Fold's I've been using Fold for many years, and they're a Bitcoin business that does creates a great product and accumulates Bitcoin. I don't think that you need to be a Bitcoin business, though, I guess is what I'm saying, in order to add Bitcoin to your balance sheet. And the more ground we can take in terms of just like onboarding new companies that have nothing to do with the space, to me, that is achieving the mission that we're trying to achieve, which is, for Bitcoin for corporations, our mission is to accelerate corporate Bitcoin adoption. And so when I, not that we had anything to do with Figma, but I'm just saying when I see that sort of adoption happening, I'm like, all right, cool, we're actually taking ground. And these are the baby steps ultimately to hyper Bitcoinization, which that's what I'm here for, right? Like even getting involved in sort of the role that I'm in and taking on leading Bitcoin for corporations it comes from my ultimate desire to accelerate hyper Bitcoinization and tell the world about Bitcoin. I see this as like the current best leverage point to actually do that, and so I'm a suit coiner now. Like, what can I say?
Well, let's talk about that a little bit, and then maybe we can, as more news comes out about the Treasury, or excuse me, MicroStrategy earnings call, we can talk about that a bit. But can you give a little bit of an explanation of what exactly you guys do at Bitcoin for Corporations? Obviously have stated some of these goals already, but like, how does that work in practice? What are the steps that you guys are taking? What kind of, is it providing resources? Is it just engaging with these companies, helping educate? What does that look like for you guys?
Yeah. So all of the above. So Bitcoin for corporations. Again, our mission is to accelerate corporate Bitcoin adoption, and we do that really by partnering with Bitcoin treasury companies who join as members. So it's a membership model. We have currently around 40 members, 40 treasury companies that are all kind of leading the charge. And so by joining as members, we give you access to our network. We provide kind of a launch pad for you to kind of tell the world about what you're doing, who you are, platforming your leaders, giving you media distribution, PR, IR support. We come alongside of the teams, and we provide them all sorts of educational resources and connections, introductions in the space that they might need, introductions to vendors that they're looking to work for that we've vetted. A big part of what we do obviously is events. So we'll host 4 symposiums per year, Bitcoin for Corporation symposiums, where we gather a lot of our members, a lot of industry leaders to have conversations and create these sort of intimate environments where they can talk to capital allocators and investors who might be interested in kind of joining their movement. And so, it's grown like crazy. We partnered with Strategy when we first launched this in Bitcoin 2024 in Nashville, and the momentum has been high. I think our members are happy with the value that they receive by being a part of the network. And the more the network grows, the more benefits accrue to our members, because we're getting to this critical mass now where I think we have enough influence and we have enough membership represented to where we're starting to look at what can we do collectively to really advance the mission. What sort of advocacy work can we do? What kind of conversations can we be in with regulators and politicians to really move the needle? This is definitely a strategic focus of 2026 for us, heading into midterm election year in the U.S. So looking to do an event in DC, for instance, where we'll gather politicians and decision makers with these industry leaders. And so, that's also one of the big benefits is just access to these events, speaking opportunities at these events. And so, it really is for Bitcoin treasury companies that are either public or pre-IPO, and also vendors in the space. If a vendor provides a product or service that's relevant to the Bitcoin treasury space, we partner with them as well to join the network. And then, a bunch of little practical things. We create dashboards for all of our members. So you can go to bitcoincorporations.com, you can click on members or dashboards, and you can navigate all the metrics. One of our goals is to try to be sort of a clearinghouse or a source of truth in a lot of ways, because you can go to like 8 different sites right now and look at the same company and see a different MNAV number. And I'm like, that's kind of a problem. Like, where is the Yahoo Finance of this space? Where is the Bloomberg terminal? And there's a lot of different great companies trying to build that, and so we're part of that race, trying to be the voice of authority and central kind of resource for all things Bitcoin treasury companies.
No, I love it. I want to get into that a little bit more. We're going to cut to a very quick commercial break, but we've got hopefully some more exciting news coming out of the Treasury. I can just keep calling MicroStrategy Treasury. I guess they've done such a good job of ingraining that in my head. But we'll be right back after a very quick commercial break, and we'll dig into that and more.
The future of capital markets runs on Bitcoin. Introducing Roxum, the first ever exchange where Bitcoiners can trade treasury stocks entirely in BTC. Get exposure to top Bitcoin holding companies like MicroStrategy and Metaplanet, priced in Bitcoin from the start. No fiat, no middlemen. This is what financial freedom looks like. Early access now live at roxum.com/treasuries. Built by Bitcoiners for Bitcoiners.
So, tell us about your furry friend here. What's his name?
Oh, this? This is Bitcoin.
Bitcoin.
It's not just a cat, he's family.
Quite a name, and I must say, looks quite pampered.
Oh, absolutely. Bitcoin deserves nothing but the best. He's my little prince.
But with such a valuable pet, aren't you afraid of losing him?
Losing Bitcoin? No, it never happened before, so it's not something I worry about. Excuse me for a moment. Bitcoin, stay here, right?
Bitcoin, no! Bitcoin, come on, little buddy, Bitcoin, I need you. Don't go.
In a world far away. Nah, just kidding. This story begins in this world. It all started in 1460 in Antwerp, when the first commodities exchange was created, but the real transformation came in 1602, when the Amsterdam Stock Exchange was founded. Considered the oldest in the world, it was the first to trade financial assets. Over the years, Britain expanded its colonial and maritime influence, and the British pound sterling overtook the Dutch guilder in the market. Thus, the London Stock Exchange became the financial centre of the world. The 20th century came, and the world got into some trouble. But shortly after World War II, the Bretton Woods Agreement established the dollar as the world's primary reserve currency, and the center of the planet moved to Wall Street. Today, we're traveling at the speed of light towards a new age, an era shaped by the consolidation of Bitcoin as the currency that will define the future of the markets. We present Roxum, a new Bitcoin-denominated market that allows trading all sorts of securities, commodities, derivatives, options, and anything you can imagine. Roxum, rock-solid markets.
Security matters. Zappo Bank. The only way to bank your Bitcoin. Apply now at zappobank.com.
All right, we are back. I am Walker America. This is the Breaking Bit. We are here with George Mekhail, Managing Director of Bitcoin for Corporations. We are now officially, I believe, competing with MicroStrategy Strategies earnings call. We'll see how that goes. But it is interesting. Just as we were on that commercial break, I was just looking at Sailor's feed, and I happened to notice he just retweeted Brian Armstrong talking about how they are long Bitcoin. Let me pull this up. But the moral of the story here is that Coinbase, someone who has obviously, to put it kindly, gone down a bit of a shitcoining rabbit hole, is now very pro-orange, right? Very pro-orange coin. They've been moving up the ranks of the Bitcoin treasury companies. They now, after this latest buy that they have, they're up to position number 9 on the treasure of the Bitcoin treasury companies with 14,548 Bitcoin. So this is interesting, right? We've had companies that I think very much embraced the altcoin slop that has been out there, now actively trying to turn and say, look, we're focused on Bitcoin, we're long Bitcoin, we're stacking Bitcoin. Do you think we start to see a heck of a lot more of this? I mean, is there a realization finally, perhaps, that Bitcoin is there's Bitcoin and there is everything else, or are they just trying to orange wash and appeal to more shareholders? How do you see this?
Yeah, so I might have a bit of a different take on this, just because I think like the entire framework that Bitcoiners have, I think, used to decide like what is orange washed and what isn't, and who's acceptable in the space and who isn't, I think is pretty inconsistently applied. Like one example I use a lot is the difference between how Bitcoiners view Kraken and Coinbase. Or forget about Coinbase because they have the history, right? So it's maybe not as fair of a comparison, but like Kraken is kind of like, every Bitcoiner loves Kraken for the most part, even though they have, we don't talk about the shit coins that they have on their platform. And then, pretty much every other exchange is like, wow, they're such shit coiners or whatever. I've always kind of thought that double standard was funny. And I'm like, say what you want about shit coins and don't invest in them, and tell people not invest in them. I do that. Like I tell people, you should just buy Bitcoin and not worry about the rest. And it is confusing and all that kind of stuff. But like, at the end of the day, I think Brian Armstrong understands what's going on, understands that this is a digital gold rush, and is trying to accumulate it as much as he can. And you can say what you want about his business and how his business makes money, selling shit coins. I think that's a different conversation in a lot of ways. But it's like, what are you going to say when DraftKings or FanDuel start stacking Bitcoin, right? Like if you look at shit coins like the way I do, which is like essentially you're gambling, right? It's not as long, I get frustrated when people try to compare, like Ethereum to Bitcoin as if they're like even should be in the same conversation. That to me is what gets people really in trouble, is when like they get equated, or like, oh, XRP is going to be the next whatever financial network. I'm like, look, you're gambling. Just say you're gambling. It's fine. Like, I don't mind a little blackjack here and there. So if we're good on that, is that it's gambling, and they're providing a service for people who like to gamble. It's not. I don't know. What am I trying to say? I'm trying to say.
I hear you there. I think. Go ahead.
I'm trying to say, what are you going to do? Well, yeah, when DraftKings adds Bitcoin to their balance sheet, what are we going to say now? Or like a company that we don't like, or the company that's providing a service that you don't like, or for advice, right? Like, I don't know.
I hear you there, and it's my knee jerk toxic reaction to call out the shitcoinery, just because it does get a lot of people wrecked. And you search for Bitcoin on Coinbase and you see 10 different Bitcoins that aren't Bitcoin. That said, like I bought my first sats through Coinbase, right? They have onboarded, like I'd be remiss if I did not mention that. That was my first exposure. That's how I first got into Bitcoin, in terms of buying. That's how a lot of people did. You should not keep your coins on an exchange. That's a different story, right? But it is, I think it's overall a positive trend to see this acknowledgement from companies like that, from companies who have made a lot of money selling these, inferior, but let's be honest, like you said there, it's gambling, right? Like that's what these shit coins are. You're free to gamble, do whatever you want with your money. It's none of my business. Don't try to convince other people to gamble on your token by claiming it has some utility that it doesn't. XRP. Right. But that's a different story, right? But
Right.
but it is a heartening thing to see a company like Coinbase really leaning into this and trying to kind of move up that ladder of, look, we've been in the space a long time. By rights, they probably should have more Bitcoin than they do, but I think maybe they're realizing that now and saying, okay, the race is on. It's not just Bitcoin or crypto companies who are buying Bitcoin now. It's any company. It seems to me that that's the realization. Like, actually, this treasury company movement is kind of sparking some of these older Bitcoin companies to say, whoa, we're not the only game in town anymore that's stacking Bitcoin. We need to kind of wise up and pay attention. And probably the biggest game in town is obviously MicroStrategy. And you guys just shared out a summary of this. Maybe if we want to talk through this at all. As you're looking at this is just a highlights you guys posted on your X account, going over Strategy's Q3 earnings. You want to walk through any of this? Was there anything that jumped out at you where, obviously what jumps out at me is 640,808 Bitcoin, an unfathomably large number of Bitcoin. I mean, that just continues to blow my mind every time I see that number. It's wild.
Yeah, it really is. And I mean, you compare that to, number two, Mara at, 53,000 Bitcoin, and you just are like, they have a level of escape velocity that is just, it's unfathomable, and it's going to be really, really hard to catch them. But that number stuff jumps out. I mean, obviously, I think paying attention to their income and their net income, it just kind of goes back to the point of, like, they do have a significant operating business, and they do, make a lot of money with their Bitcoin yield strategy as well. The other big one is the stretch dividend rate going up to 10.5. So from 10.25 to 10.5, you can now earn on stretch. I think that's interesting in the face of the Fed cutting rates yesterday officially, and I think that's probably an intentional, like, market signal that they're doing there. Is like, hey, you're going to get an email from your bank that's going to say your savings account just got cut by a quarter, and what we're going to do is we're going to increase the dividend rate by a quarter. So I think that's a fascinating play. Again, shows their confidence, shows the demand in that product. And then the last thing, the S&P credit rating. This was news I think that broke either yesterday or Tuesday. B minus, and we're happy with that. We're glad to be here. Thank you, S&P. Big shout out to the rating agencies for even acknowledging our existence, and we will take the B minus. And I just think that's a huge development in the space to have that acknowledgement. And then, I think we're going to start seeing a lot more of that in the year and 2 years ahead, probably.
Do you think, there was a lot of talk about S&P inclusion, Strategy now, correct me if I'm wrong, but they basically, they meet all the requirements for that inclusion. Is that something that you think takes longer than people want it to actually happen, just because this is still, MicroStrategy is still kind of they've been around for a while, but their Bitcoin strategy is still very novel. It's something that they're a new kid on the block from that perspective. Is this something that you think takes a lot longer than people are anticipating?
Yeah, I think, look, there's a lot of dynamics in this space right now globally that are all starting to converge. Regulators are starting to pay closer attention. There's markets right now where basically everything is, like, paused until it's like regulators are being like, hold up. Everybody just stop what you're doing. We need to figure out what the hell's going on here. And, no more of this until we figure it out. And so, again, this is, part of the work that we want to pursue is advocacy and education on those fronts where those conversations are taking place. But when it comes to index inclusion, I think that's another part of the conversation is, like, the decision makers that say yes or no to whether or not these companies are going to be included in indexes have a lot of questions in terms of, like, are these funds, are these actual, what's the operating business like? And so, it's going to take a little while, but I think this is a good signal that, traditional sort of capital markets people are starting to pay attention and recognizing that they really can't ignore what's happening. And so they got to acknowledge us and give us a B minus. So we'll take it.
It's still a passing grade, right?
I was stoked with a B minus. Like, if I got a B minus, I was like, yes, let's go.
Love it. Well, one of the other things that just jumps out to me that I think is worth highlighting here is MicroStrategy's cost basis, because it feels like, there was right now their cost basis is sitting at $74,032 per Bitcoin. with a $47.4 billion total, spend, how much they shelled out for it, market value of $70.9 billion, given the, let's say, 110,600 Bitcoin price right now. They are significantly in the black, right? They're like that's many billions of profit at this point. I think there were a lot of narratives for a while about, and pretty much unfounded about, well, strategy is going to get liquidated. Strategy is going to get liquidated. This was throughout, we all remember it, throughout the bear market when Bitcoin was all the way down to, 16K, all these narratives popping up of, look, they're going to get liquidated. They're going to be forced sellers. All this Bitcoin's going to flood the market. Do you think we're kind of beyond that now for MicroStrategy? Like, is this to the point where they're established enough, where they've kind of have the proven track record as well, and they have a cost basis that is significantly lower? Like, if Bitcoin, dipped down there, sure, if it went to 58K again, they'd be in the red, but like, they've got a lot of room to still be in the black. Do you think a lot of those narratives are kind of dying out, or do we still just see the same old FUD recycled again and again with this?
I think it's mostly dead when it comes to strategy. I hope. I think you'll start hearing it again. Like, sentiment is so fickle. It's like if Bitcoin drops to 80K, which I don't think it's going to, but let's just say it does, you're going to start hearing people coming out of the woodwork and being like, "Oh, we're close to their cost basis or whatever." The thing is, we're at a point now where the conviction is so deep and the understanding of the asset is so profound that if Bitcoin dips below their cost basis, you know what they're going to do? They're going to buy more Bitcoin. So it's like they're not going to be in trouble. I think people don't really understand that well. Like, their cost, they're not like, it's not like, yeah, they're gonna be in deep shit if it's like 50K. Or I think Saylor has said, like, we're good all the way down to 10K or something like that. Just in terms of what they could do, where they could go get more money. How the strength of their balance sheet, the strength of their operating business. It's going to be a buy opportunity for them. It's not, and really, like, I think that's how all treasury companies should think about market cycles, is like, I'm here for the long haul. I understand the name of the game is buying as much Bitcoin as possible, and I'm stoked about the dips because that means I can buy Bitcoin for lower. And if the dips scare you and the pullbacks put you in a position where you're going to get liquidated, you're going to have to sell all your Bitcoin, and you're going to have to, get rid of your company or whatever, then you're probably not executing the strategy that well. Like, if you're not acknowledging the fact that, we're still in price discovery, Bitcoin is still a relatively new asset, and it's volatile, and you don't, appreciate the volatility, you're scared of it, then, you're probably not that well positioned, and you should rethink kind of how you're deploying your capital and how you're executing the strategy.
Yeah, no, I think that that's definitely fair. And I think that we probably will see, it would be, it'd be naive to think that we're not going to see some of these treasury companies maybe get wiped out if we go into some sort of a prolonged bear, right? That would be naive. But do you think in that event, does a company like MicroStrategy, obviously now at this point, they have not done any sort of acquisitions of other Bitcoin treasury companies. But to me, it just seems like, given that they are the 800-pound gorilla in the room, given that they have the proven track record, they know how to weather these storms. Does strategy start to look at any prolonged downturns, or really, treasury companies getting hammered? Do they start to look at that as a, acquisition opportunity, a way to maybe be able to acquire more Bitcoin through different means? Is that something you think is on their radar?
I thought so. Going into my conversation with Saylor, I interviewed him, I think a month ago or so. And I asked him this question, and thinking he was going to say yes, but he straight up said no. Like, we are not going to be buyers. We are not interested in M&A. I'll let someone else do that. So he wasn't saying it's not a good strategy potentially for a company that is trying to take that approach. Strive sort of representing kind of one of those companies already completing an M&A with Semler. And I think they've positioned themselves to like have a approach where they're positioning themselves to be kind of the M&A company. But if Saylor is true to his word, they're not interested. He said, I don't want to buy the underlying business. I don't want to acquire the headaches of another company and their payroll and all that kind of stuff. I'd rather just buy Bitcoin. So we'll see how that plays out.
Yeah, it is going to be interesting. it does seem like for a lot of these smaller ones, you mentioned Strive and Semler, that may be a strategy that more of them pursue. I mean, we'll see. Obviously, I think what's clear is, I mean, and maybe I'll just flip over the screen to another share here and just show kind of the list, because I like looking at this data on BitcoinTreasuries.net. Like it's a great site for this. It's fascinating to kind of look at this and see what's happening, right? And if you look at this, I'm just making sure this went ahead and went live there. It's and can you see this right now? Yes, you can. Okay, great. So strategy is obviously far and away the fastest horse right now, right? That's undeniable. You mentioned Mar earlier. They have a significant stack of Bitcoin. You got 21, which I think that's still that's the Jack Mallers and Tether. I think that's still pending in terms of the actual merger happening there, right? That's still kind of like, I don't know. I'm guessing the government shutdown is maybe affecting that a little bit. I don't know if there can be too much movement there. But, then it drops off, after kind of those let's say those top 10, we get down into the less than 10,000 Bitcoin pretty quickly. But there is a long list. Like, this is a long tail with all of these. In terms of, you see obviously most of this list is American companies, with some notable exceptions, obviously Metaplanet being the biggest, sitting at that, that number 4 spot. Do you think, I mean, is there, are we still at the very early stages of these companies who are pursuing this play? I think eventually we get to the point where every company just holds Bitcoin on their balance sheet because it's what you do. It's how you preserve capital, right? It's how you preserve purchasing power. But in the meantime, the companies that are getting to this race first are realizing this is a way for me to actually attract new investors to pump my stock. How long do you think that period lasts before it's just so commonplace that saying I have Bitcoin on my balance sheet is like, okay, cool, so does everyone? Like, how long does that take to get there?
Yeah, I mean, I think hopefully it's happening faster than I expected it to. I will say that. I think obviously the momentum has slowed a little bit with kind of the crowd market that we're in right now. But I think over the next couple of years, you're going to start seeing more kind of mainstream companies that you've heard of outside of the Bitcoin world, like Figma, like Tesla. Some of these other ones that are recognizable on this list. GameStop, I think should be within the top 50. Oh, there they are, 22. I think over the next 2 years, we're going to start seeing, everyday kind of mainstream type companies add Bitcoin to their balance sheet and pop up on these lists. And they're going to be from all over the world. And it's just going to be like in the same way that Figma put 767 Bitcoin on their balance sheet and, quietly just IPO'd and was like, oh yeah, it's in our treasury. We just super chill about it, like very nonchalant. We're definitely going to see more of that. It's what is, like, I don't want to say inevitable because I don't like using that word when it comes to hyper Bitcoinization, because it kind of makes it sound like there's no work to do, right? And it's just like Bitcoin's going to do its thing and we're going to take over the world. Like, I don't subscribe to that kind of mindset. I'm more like, dude, we have to tell everybody about Bitcoin. Like, they don't know. Like, I feel like we have this asymmetric information that, it's a sense of like duty or obligation in some sense to spread the word. And so, but inevitable in the sense that like people are going to get it the same way we got it. And eventually, like, I don't know if you're going to see Apple or Netflix or Google on there anytime soon, but I think you should. Maybe it'll happen. Maybe they'll have a Bitcoiner on their board, be like, hey, here's a crazy idea. But I think we're still a ways from like the big companies making this level of change, just because it requires moving such a massive entity into this. Like, I know Saylor recently did a presentation for the board of directors of Microsoft, and I think the motion was for Microsoft to look at considering to explore considering the idea of maybe someday we'll put Bitcoin on our balance sheet. And even that proposal, even after hearing from Saylor, I think they gave him like 5 minutes or 3 minutes to present.
Yeah.
Even that, I think, received like a 5% yes vote. It was something crazy low, where they're just like not even interested a little bit. So I do think there's still time, a lot of time between now and when those companies will get it. But I think like the medium range, GameStop, Figma type companies. I think there's a lot of private companies that have Bitcoin on their balance sheet, but we don't know that because they're not required to disclose anything about their financials because they're private. So I think that's the other kind of dark horse is private companies. So yeah, I think the next like 2 years especially are going to be very, very interesting because, institutions have bought more Bitcoin quarter over quarter than is being mined. And that's just simply with a scarce asset that's not sustainable. Like you can't sustain these price levels if there's that much demand compared to how much supply is entering circulation. So I think we have all the ingredients for a very fascinating like 2-year window.
Well, on that note, I mean, you mentioned, okay, yeah, we've got companies snapping up way more than the new supplies being issued. We've still, obviously, there's a lot of sellers as well. Like there's a lot of these large whales that we've seen. That one whale that sold 80,000 Bitcoin. I mean, sold more Bitcoin than every Bitcoin treasury company has except MicroStrategy, and it's just some guy, right, who would probably mined a bunch in the early days, like insane levels. But there's been a lot of talk about, okay, is the 4-year cycle dead? Did the 4-year cycle ever exist? Are we in a new paradigm now? Is this time different? Because, the institutions are no longer just coming, the institutions are here. We see this. We have a list of institutions that are doing this. You've also got the ETFs driving a massive amount of demand. That's not even to mention retail, right? Which I feel that retail still has not even really showed up yet in this cycle. Where are you at with this? Is this time different? Do the treasury companies plus the ETFs basically indicate kind of a new paradigm for how Bitcoin moves? Does it smooth out that volatility of Bitcoin a lot? Does it, just make it a little bit more boring, a little bit more predictable, just kind of, boring you to death on its way to $1 million? How are you looking at this?
So I am definitely one of those psychopaths who thinks this time is different. I'm, a perma bull and, it's up only, kind of a mentality. So don't listen to me when I answer this question. That's my disclaimer.
Not financial advice.
Yeah, I do think this time is different. Again, I don't think this is sustainable to have institutions increasingly buying more Bitcoin than what is being mined. I think there's a lot of dynamics about the cycle that are different in a lot of ways. Not just price action, not just corporate adoption and institutions buying, but like you have like the knots and core conversation taking place. You have some really interesting dynamics happening in the mining world. Where the new generation ASICs aren't powerful enough to warrant replacement costs for the last generation ASICs. So the market is basically flooded with ASICs that are cheap at a time when normally at this time in the cycle ASICs are really hard to get. This is really hard to get your hands on ASICs that are going to mine profitably. And so there's kind of the opposite dynamic happening in the mining space where hash price isn't necessarily moving at the rate that miners, I think, had priced in or expected, even while hash rate continues to hit new all-time highs. So there's more miners coming online. So it's just like nothing really makes sense in that world, but it's kind of a little bit bullish in the sense that it's a sign of a little bit of stability in the ecosystem, I think. But then you have the whole curveball of AI competing and being attractive to miners who have all of the capacity in the world to pivot over to AI if it's going to be more profitable. And so, is that shitcoining? How are we going to judge them when that inevitably happens? I think miners' incentives, especially the big miners who have enough compute to fill the demand from AI companies, they're going to have some interesting decisions to make, and they're already kind of looking at that. So. What does that do to hash rate? Do more miners come offline because they're going to dedicate resources to AI compute? So yeah, I think this time is definitely different. That doesn't mean that we're not going to see maybe a little bit of a pullback. I just think it's going to be, number one, less violent than in past cycles. It's not going to be these massive red candles in a matter of hours like we've seen before. It's going to be either, kind of like it is right now. It's like a slow little bleed to 106, and then you wake up tomorrow morning and it's back at 110, and you're like, all right, cool. And then 2 days later, we're at all-time highs. So I think it's kind of going to keep doing that for a little bit. But then there's going to be the events that are going to cause it to spike up, where big companies are FOMOing in, or nation states are FOMOing in, or nation states start to mine. I think that's probably what's also happening with hash price. Is you're seeing nation states come online and not talk about it, kind of do it discreetly. So yeah, that's my outlook. I'm bullish.
I love it. This made me think of one aspect of Bitcoin treasury companies, or one category that we actually did not talk about earlier, which is miners. This is something that I think is super interesting. Again, Mara is currently the number two holder of Bitcoin with 53,250 Bitcoin. There's also been, at this time, where a lot of the Bitcoin treasury companies have been kind of languishing in the depths of their own little personal bear markets. Bitcoin miners have been ripping like almost across the board, have been ripping pretty hard. Are you looking at that dynamic? Do you consider, I assume they're still, Bitcoin treasury companies, they're just a sort of a different breed of them, right? They have different incentives as well. Obviously, they have way different operating models, but do you guys look at that at all? Are you, do they also, do you bring them kind of into the fold at Bitcoin for Corporations? But then how do you look at that more broadly? Is that something where you're like, this is a totally different dynamic at play, and clearly the market likes miners right now, right?
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, I think they have a different mindset than sort of, like, I guess, the pure play treasury companies. I think they see it as just the best place to store value. Mara was sitting on 50,000 even for a long time, and that number did not change until just recently. Because I think the market right now has been rewarding companies that are buying Bitcoin and in a way that's accretive to shareholders. Not during this pullback, obviously, but I just mean like during that hype cycle and the run up, when you started to see all these new treasury companies come online, the ones that were being kind of rewarded from a stock perspective were the ones that were pure play treasury companies, and the ones that kind of didn't see much action were the Folds of the world, the Semlers, who have a significant operating business. So that was an interesting dynamic, because then it was like, okay, I guess we chase the sort of pure play. We're going to be an accretive Bitcoin treasury company. We're going to stack as much Bitcoin as possible. But I really think that what's happening with miners, and a big reason that their stocks are ripping, is because they are looking more closely at potential AI and how to get involved in that. And so the more they talk about that, the more the market seems to be rewarding them for that. So I think that's a huge kind of curveball in our entire ecosystem, is what's going to happen there. And how it's going to impact hash rate, how it's going to impact treasuries, how they're going to look at continuing to stack and all that. Because in theory, they're going to be even more profitable than they have been. These companies are massive. Mara, Riot, CleanSpark, all in the top 10, and then Hut 8 right not too far behind them. So yeah, I think miners are going to continue to be a big part of this. We're in conversations with a lot of miners. We would love to have them be a part of Bitcoin for Corporations, and haven't quite gotten them to come into the network yet, but certainly high on our radar.
I think it's really interesting to see how this dynamic is playing out with the basically, saying these miners, they have access to a lot of energy, and they have, modern data centers, right? Obviously, they're, you're not going to run an AI, generative AI model. You're not going to be using an ASIC for AI compute, because that's the whole, the whole point of an ASIC is that it's doing something very specific for Bitcoin, right? Or at least Bitcoin ASICs are. So it'll be interesting to see, like, obviously there's huge refab costs associated with that kind of thing, but they do have access to the energy. They have the know-how to be able to run these sorts of things. And obviously, like, if there's, miners are, it seems, they're really profit maximalists, as everybody should be. Like, they're chasing cheap energy, and they're chasing what's going to make them the most money. And they have the ability to just switch off those Bitcoin miners at any time. It's one of the things that makes them so powerful for load balancing with grids, right? So they're very uniquely positioned in this whole thing, and it's going to be fascinating to see what happens. Your point about, do we see some hash rate drop as these miners kind of maybe jump ship and go to the AI side? Let's see, but it's certainly going to be fascinating to watch. I'm excited. I'm bullish. I'm, at the end of the day, I play with some of these treasury companies just to usually remind myself that I'm a bad trader, that I should have, just been stacking Bitcoin instead. But that is the beauty of it, right? Is that you have this asset that's at the core of it all that anybody, whether it's a treasury company, a government, or an individual, can access, and that's Bitcoin. And so it's like the playing field, it feels, is a lot more even than it's ever been because Bitcoin exists. So, whether you're a company or a nation state or an individual, you have access to Bitcoin. And it's a really beautiful paradigm shift. It's a, let's say, leveling the playing field between Main Street and Wall Street a little bit. And I think that's ultimately that's a great thing.
Totally. No, I think that's really well said. I think it's exactly what's happening. I think people, if you're a Bitcoiner, you should be excited about what's happening. I think there's a lot of FUD about, intentions and what if it's too centralized and all that kind of stuff. I think it's all good for Bitcoin at the end of the day. Like, yeah, MicroStrategy has more Bitcoin than you, and there's a lot of cope around that you're never going to have 600,000 Bitcoin probably. But if you were in that position where you could raise money for cheap and have cheap debt or issue shares or create preferreds to buy more Bitcoin, you would do the same thing. And so yeah, I'm excited to see how it all plays out. And with miners, they're going to have some decisions to make, and that's also going to be very fun to watch that plays out. And I think it's going to be a big part of the dynamic in terms of like whether or not this time is different, whether or not this is a 4-year cycle. So a lot of variables.
Yeah, I love it. Well, George, want to be conscious of your time here. We're running right up on it. Where do you want to send folks who may be interested in learning more about what you guys are doing at Bitcoin for Corporations, whether they're just a pleb who's curious, or whether they are a prospective or current Bitcoin treasury company? Where can they find you guys?
Yeah, so check out bitcoinforcorporations.com. We are at Bitcoin for Corps on Twitter. I am at Mekhail, and would love to talk more, especially if you're a treasury company, if you're a custodian or a tax advisor to treasury companies. And then, we'll be in Amsterdam in a couple of weeks. We're hosting a symposium on the 12th. There's still some space left. If you're going to be in Amsterdam, definitely come check it out.
Amazing. Well, George, thank you so much. It's great that we can talk about whether it be parenting or Bitcoin treasury companies, or toppling our fiat overlords. There's always a different angle I can take with you. So appreciate you coming on and sharing your time. I love the work that you are doing and very much appreciate it. And thank you to everyone who watched across all the different platforms. And if you were watching this instead of MicroStrategy's earnings call, I really do especially appreciate that, because that's quite a magnetic pull there. So I'm Walker America. This has been The Breaking Bit. I will be back next week on Friday. And then after that, we'll be back to our normally scheduled sessions on Tuesdays. Thank you guys so much for joining. I will see you all next week.
The future of capital markets runs on Bitcoin. Introducing Roxum, the first ever exchange where Bitcoiners can trade treasury stocks entirely in BTC. Get exposure to top Bitcoin holding companies like MicroStrategy and Metaplanet, priced in Bitcoin from the start. No fiat, no middlemen. This is what financial freedom looks like. Early access now live at roxum.com/treasuries. Built by Bitcoiners for Bitcoiners.
So, tell us about your furry friend here. What's his name?
Oh, this? This is Bitcoin.
Bitcoin.
It's not just a cat, he's family.
Quite a name, and I must say, looks quite pampered.
Oh, absolutely. Bitcoin deserves nothing but the best. He's my little prince.
But with such a valuable pet, aren't you afraid of losing him?
Losing Bitcoin? No, it never happened before, so it's not something I worry about. Excuse me for a moment. Bitcoin, stay here, right?
Bitcoin, no! Bitcoin, come on, little buddy, Bitcoin, I need you. Don't go.
In a world far away. Nah, just kidding. This story begins in this world. It all started in 1460 in Antwerp, when the first commodities exchange was created, but the real transformation came in 1602, when the Amsterdam Stock Exchange was founded. Considered the oldest in the world, It was the first to trade financial assets. Over the years, Britain expanded its colonial and maritime influence, and the British pound sterling overtook the Dutch guilder in the market. Thus, the London Stock Exchange became the financial centre of the world. The 20th century came, and the world got into some trouble. But shortly after World War II, the Bretton Woods Agreement established the dollar as the world's primary reserve currency, and the centre of the planet moved to Wall Street. Today, we're travelling at the speed of light towards a new age, an era shaped by the consolidation of Bitcoin as the currency that will define the future of the markets. We present Roxum, a new Bitcoin-denominated market that allows trading all sorts of securities, commodities, derivatives, options, and anything you can imagine. Roxum, rock-solid markets.
Security matters. Zappo Bank. The only way to bank your Bitcoin. Apply now at zappobank.com.